the second and potentially last album from the Canadian stoner rock band Priestess. It is called Prior to the Fire. And Priestess as a band, they had we'll call it a bumpy start. So they came from various different bands. The lead vocalist, Mikey Hepner, came from a punk band called the Dropouts, if my memory lasts, which it very rarely does, but we'll go for it. And when they changed the name, he finally got this group of musicians together, and they thought let's have a name change. They went with Priestess. It stuck, obs. But yeah, initially people thought they were an all-female Judas Priest cover band, which I understand because when I went looking for the band just to find out a little bit more about them, when I put the word Priestess band into Google, I think one of the responses I got was Judas Priestess, the all-female Judas Priest cover band. It's understandable. When you look at a picture of the band, maybe not so, but whatever. And initially, when they had the first release of the debut album, Hello Master, critics kind of attacked the classic rock sound to it. It's a fucking million miles away with what everyone did for Greta Van Fleet, but whatever. And the best quote I could find, or best opinion I could find, I should say, was that they were merely paying homage to the bygone classic rock sound and not trying to craft their own unique identity. Bearing in mind, Greta Van Fleet now exists. Nevertheless, critics and peers, music and just general music fans picked up the album more following its 2006 re-release. I can't believe I've just said 26 for 2006. Got re-released for because initially it was just released in Canada. They got a secondary distributor who was going to do it to put it in America and eventually Europe and just everywhere else in between. And they ended up getting a huge new fan base following the inclusion of Lay Down on Guitar Hero 3. It was one of my first favourite songs on the game, and it is where I found the band. I'll happily say that the reason why I know about Priestess and I know about Prior to the Fire is because Lay Down was on Guitar Hero 3, and I fucking love that song. And the game. Spent way too much of my first year of university playing it, though. And second year. Not the point. And they also had Run Home was on a film. I can't remember what the film was called, but I remember it was. And I Am the Night, Color Me Black, I think was on a couple of NHL games. So around about 2006, 2007, they were getting featured on a lot of video games. And so they were getting a lot more attention. They even got taken out on tour with Motorhead. And in the midst of this touring cycle, they began work on what would eventually become Prior to the Fire. And during this writing process, vocalist guitarist Mikey Hepner began introducing his bandmates to all the prog rock music he listened to when he was a kid. Initially, he thought his bandmates were going to hate it because they were all stoner, worship at the altar of Black Sabbath kind of, and Led Zeppelin kind of dudes. Fair game, it's everyone each to their own, but they all were proper into it, so they wanted to put more of this prog rock sound into the second album. Problem was, the album again was marred by just all different kinds of bad luck. This is due in part to the excessive touring of Hello Master, because they toured that album to buggery, and they had a lot of disputes with the distributor as to what was and wasn't acceptable, to the point where the distributor RCA initially refused to release the album, thinking it wasn't going to be commercial enough. They didn't see a radio friendly song, or they didn't see how it could get a mainstream audience. And bearing in mind, when a production company releases an album, they need to be sure that they're going to get money back off of it. And in a very rare turn of events, they actually allowed Priestess to release the album on another label. So basically, in the end, because Priestess now have no ill will against RCA, because RCA basically funded this album. They funded Prior to the Fire, Albeit they didn't release it, but they funded it and let them take all the money they just put into this album and release it somewhere else. So it is in this one album, you've got both ends of the good and bad side of a production company. And yes, so it eventually became Prior to the Fire. It got delayed by about a year, and it is an absolute riff heavy tour de force. I cannot state how much I love this album. For a style of music that I never usually go for, I cannot consider my fan of like the stoner rock movement outside the main ones, like obviously like Queens of the Stone Age. You don't even do stoner rock that much anymore. I can't actually go beyond that. The only I can't say there's an album. It's more just like the odd song here and there from like You Need a and the guys who did Mississippi five sorry Johnson, something like that. It is very like you can tell it's very much a case of little songs here and there, never the whole genre. But it's psychedelic backed stoner metal, and it does go into like the prog rock world at times. The opening of the entire album is this feedback twinned riff that eventually leads into what is part of the song Lady Killer, and the entire way through it is just like massive galloping riffs going all the way through. Everything that they got slagged off for Hello Master, they continue to do so good in this album, where the influences and everything that they've grown up with on their sleeve. So you've got Maiden quality melodies and Sideways Attack and Raccoon Eyes. Excuse me. The Firebird sounds like the song Black Sabbath were waiting 30 years to write. And like it does cover like you can see where they were fans of like Maiden, Black Sabbath, Zeppelin, etc. The core, like the absolute peak of this album is the vocalist Mikey Hepner. He is on absolute top form for the entire album, but on a song like It Baffles the Mind, his vocals on the chorus, they're so fucking powerful. And from like my limited knowledge of like the stoner rock world, it's so difficult to find a vocalist with this level of I was gonna say energy is the wrong word. This level of power and this level of stability, because he doesn't really like. A lot of people trying to go for those like big soaring vocals do tend to warble a little bit. Fucking Hepner doesn't. He fucking nails every last note to this album, and the absolute peak, the best this album can get. And I don't know, for this song alone, I don't know why people don't listen to him more. There is an 8-minute song on a stoner rock album called The Gem. It is, although it is a stoner rock album, this is prog metal at its absolute finest. This is a juggernaut. It is a mashup of Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, pretty much the entire new wave of British heavy metal scene melded into a song. It starts as like a dual guitar harmonies that goes on for about a minute or so, goes into literally like galloping on the drums, galloping on the rhythm section. It's just a big like, and the gradually increasing tempo into like the main sung verses, at which point Hepner just like powers through like the Kool-Aid guy and all those American TV shows and Family Guy, which is so much about, just smashes through the wall, and again can't understate how good he is on this album. And everything sort of like winds down a bit, and it is this like very calm, eclectic part where it's just a like fairly clean guitar a little bit, and then eventually like more and more instruments come in, so it's a little bit of drums, a little bit of bass here, there, and everywhere, and the whole thing just erupts again into the big, massive finale. And in a year that had Cracked Sky, Great Britain, No Time to Bleed, Endgame, Liberis for Aladar, The Gem may be, or may have been, I should say, the song of 2009. I don't know where I got 2011 from earlier. Yeah, it is just, and to follow. They then follow the gem with communicating via eyes, and just the way it flows from the ending sequence of the gem into like a quiet starting communicating via eyes, and then it picks up again. Everything on this album flows just so well. Everything just perfectly timed and complements the previous song, which then complements the next song, which then complements the previous song. It is just fantastic, and you just want to keep going over and over again, like I have for the past 10 years. After the album was released, and as good as it was, it's been damn near silence from Priestess. And they were meant to play Roadburn Festival in 2012. They suddenly said we can't do it anymore and just dropped out the lineup. And from about 2012, outside of the guy saying, "Oh, we're in new bands now," or like here's some old demos from the Price of the Fire days, so they had released a song called Dweller and something else. It's been pretty much silent. Hepner said at the time the band lacked confidence in the material that had been recorded for the third album, and they were going to go back and start again. And yeah, it's. I think officially they are classed as on hold because no one has really heard anything. It was just going to be a case of we're going to come back when we come back. In the years since, Hepner formed a garage rock band called UBT, which I think have already split up. Drummer Vince Nudo briefly joined Kurt Vile and the Violators, and also formed. I really hope I pronounce this again. Lots of foreign languages this week. Frères Lumières, which is I know for a fact I butchered that. It's a film scoring group which he started with Priestess guitarist Dan Watchorn, and finally bassist Mike Dyball joined the metal outfit Wet Metal, which is a terrible name for a band. I'm sorry, Michael. And that was the story of Price of the Fire. To say they like had rough beginnings would be, I think, pretty accurate. The critics panned them for the exact same thing bands are doing now. They labels were saying they weren't good enough, even though they had fucking Hello Master, were on games and movies here, there, and everywhere. Then labels just said, actually, we don't care about how successful you are. We don't want you to, we want you to sort of sound more towards a buying audience, not what you want to do. They released this fucking epic in Prior to the Fire, and then just nothing. It's a massive shame, absolutely, but as someone who's had like some of the most favourite bands of recent memory break up, I am very much understanding that the music industry is one full of bad luck and dickheads. If you're interested in Prior to the Fire, you like that sort of like progressive stoner rock sound that I've been describing, it is absolutely an album for you if you are a fan of Mastodon, particularly the more recent stuff. So Once More Around the Sun, The Hunter, the album that I can never remember that came in between those two. That came afterwards. Came out recently. Nope, can't remember it. But yeah, more latter-day Mastodon stuff. Red Fang, The Sword. I kept seeing people compare the Priestess to The Sword. I thought, nah, no way. Went back and listened to a Sword album. I was like, yep. They are like distant cousins. Yeah, it's a good comparison. So yeah, Mastodon, Red Fang, The Sword, any of them. I think you'll fucking love Priestess if you haven't heard it already.